Yes, sir. We're here.
Hello from the past again.
Oh, just a few hours. Don't tell them that.
Yeah.
We're recording. So if some major news event happens between 4 Eastern and 7 Eastern, we're sorry we missed it.
Yeah.
And you'll have to get your coverage of that somewhere else, which will be bad for you, those viewers who would do that, because, of course, the analysis would be nothing compared to what we have to offer. So having said all that, we have some agenda items.
Yeah.
And we want to start off with...
Rest in peace to the Reverend Jesse Jackson.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. Jesse Jackson died. It was a bad day. It was like 3 in one day, right? It was Robert Duvall, Jesse Jackson,
yeah,
and Frederick Wiseman, who's an amazing documentary filmmaker who did all these documentaries about institutions from like the 1960s or 50s even onward. So it was a rough day for the culture, as they say. But Jesse Jackson, yeah, I go way back with Jesse Jackson. In college, I basically sort of helped with his campaign a little bit. Had my Jesse Jackson 1988 T-shirt. He came to Ohio when I was there, and he did a press conference, and I covered it as a reporter. And it's amazing, at that press conference, he was announcing his policy proposal, as if you were president, he would do this, of sending weapons to all the so-called frontline states around South Africa. This is when the anti-apartheid movement was at its peak, of course, late 80s. And he was calling for sending weapons to all the states that bordered South Africa, because South Africa at that time was launching incursions into bordering states for various reasons. And he was always both the most radical anti-imperialist of any American politician ever to this day, I guess, except for Ron Paul, although even Ron Paul sort of didn't have some of the analysis that Jesse Jackson had. But he was phenomenal. I mean, to the point where he's talking about arming sort of anti-imperialist forces elsewhere. And he was super sophisticated. He brought the Palestine issue into the Democratic Party. He was the first really Democratic politician to talk about it, the first to make it at all legitimate, to be sympathetic to Palestinians and I think he even used the word Zionism, to be at least skeptical of Zionism. And then, of course, he also was basically a social democrat, soft democratic socialist. I think he was even a member of DSA, or he was certainly around DSA when I was around DSA back in the 80s. Massive redistribution policies, major social welfare policies, but he's most famous. And that's why the left loved him. And that's why I'm still, even though I'm no longer on the left, I still have a lot of affection for Jesse Jackson, especially for his foreign policy views, which is the most important issue. And because he ended up doing this, but he didn't start out, certainly in the 70s and 80s, being a culture warrior, wokester, race hustler. He ended up sort of in that world and facilitating much of that by sort of brokering these deals. This is Operation Push, like in the 90s, I think, late 80s and 90s, where they would sort of bribe corporations to hire black people in executive positions. And then, of course, Jesse Jackson was the one brokering it and often getting a cut of that deal or some sort of benefit from it. And that kind of brought in the whole era of racial representation politics, kind of in a very corrupt, cronyist way. So Jesse's certainly in a large way responsible for that. But that was late in the game when he was fading, when the Democrats had pushed him out back in the late 80s and early 90s, as I said. So it's a mixed record for sure. There's more to be said, but those are the main highlights. Of course, what people will talk about today is him having the nerve, the gall, the temerity, the outright bigotry to refer to New York City as Hymietown, as if New York City's not Hymietown. New York City's been Hymietown for about 100 years. And you know how I know that? Hymies told me in New York City. Every Hymy I knew in New York City was very proud of the fact that Jews dominated New York City. Its cultural life, its political life, its economics, of course. And Jesse, as I said, had the nerve to to say that he said it in private, and that in itself brought down his whole campaign.
Yeah, his private comments on that one. Just have to say, one of the best SNL sketches is when Eddie Murphy plays the Reverend Jesse Jackson singing a song called "Hysteria."
Oh, I forgot that.
Motown band. It's hilarious. But the other private comment of his that's going around is he wanted to he said Barack Obama is talking down to black people. I want to cut his nuts off because Jesse was a good soul and he didn't like the paternalism that came with Obama's attitude towards the black community.
Yes, but, and here's where Jesse Jackson is, highly contradictory.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, he was great, and I loved him for that. He was pretty much the only Democratic politician at the time to talk about Obama in that way, and to specifically call him out for all of his lecturing and scolding of black audiences. Whenever he gave a talk at a black church, he would tell the people to pull up their pants and stop watching Sports Center and stop eating Popeye's chicken and go vote, of course, which is what the most important thing any person can do. And Jesse Jackson specifically hated Obama for that. And of course, for supplanting him as the king of black politics in Chicago and within the Democratic Party. But it was many things. But the thing is, Jesse Jackson, and this is in my book, Renegade History, by the way, in the 1970s, he launched a campaign against disco music.
Oh, yeah.
Which he saw as being sort of a degenerate force, bringing down the black community. And so he has his own history. And of course, he comes from the Martin Luther King civil rights movement. We all know that. And as we know from my book as well, that King sort of began that. He was one of the first civil rights black leaders to spend a lot of time criticizing black culture, black behavior, scolding black people, explicitly telling them to act more white and to be more white. Completely assimilationist. Now, Jesse Jackson never went that far with it, but he did carry forward that part of King's legacy that, of course, no one ever talks about, which was a real hostility to black culture. Jesse Jackson, though, I don't think he was ever that hostile to black culture. He didn't really continue that campaign. That didn't remain a major part of his politics, but he did participate in it, probably for opportunistic reasons. So a mixed bag, but overall, especially because of his amazing, and also he really understood foreign policy. He really got it on a very deep level, more than any politician I've ever come into contact with. Because of that, and because, he did for a long time lead a politics that was not race forward, actually, even though that was always certainly present and ambient. He wasn't pushing that kind of racial politics that we ended up having.
Jeremy Carl just shared a campaign ad of Jesse Jackson's, saying it was the best campaign ad he ever saw. And it was a bunch of white farmers thanking Jesse Jackson for organizing for him. So it was definitely a class consciousness there too.
So that clip, I believe, is the only time I'm ever aware of my mother crying about anything. Yeah, which might explain a few things about me. But he got, because he talked across race about class. He basically comes out of sort of a essentially Marxian worldview, which Bernie Sanders type, which is that race is unimportant, race can be overcome, racial division, racism can be overcome and will wither away if we have real equality, economic equality, political equality among the people. That was really his politics, which has its problems, but I certainly prefer it tremendously to the racial politics we've had for the last several decades.
Oh, and on that, we should just explicitly note that he represents a generation of black leadership that came from the church, whereas the Black Lives Matter, the stuff that we're familiar with now, came out of the academy. Yeah,
100%. Yeah, that's a crucial point. Yes, right, exactly. Yeah, the whole civil rights generation that he was the youngest member of it, basically. And it was kind of amazing that he died. He was 84. I would have thought he was about 10 years older than that. But they were all ministers. They were all Southern Baptist and Methodist ministers. And as you said, the whole Black Lives Matter generation is right. They come out of Swarthmore and Bowdoin and Princeton and Berkeley and Stanford and UCLA. And they talk like it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And they invented Me Too. They were in on that.
Right.
And it's time to walk into the fire of the Epstein files again.
Yeah, right. The history of hysterias. It's good
Yeah.
to bring up the recent history of hysterias. And some people have been cataloging the mass hysterias of the last 20 years, but they're missing some. I mean, 2011 is when I dated, and I've talked about this a lot in very previous podcasts. 2011 is when Barack Obama issued the letter to universities saying that they would have their funding pulled if they didn't basically enact massive DEI, but especially also if they didn't start prosecuting internally date rape allegations, which was then called date rape. And that set off a massive firestorm for those who can remember. It's funny we've forgotten this, but that was the big thing. And Me Too's origins were actually on college campuses. And the absolute epicenter of it was the college I happened to be working at the time, which was Occidental College, which just has this collection of completely fanatical, and that's the word, fanatical professors who are, they're almost like cult leaders, and they took it upon themselves to organize a whole movement and gin up this hysteria among students that all the women there were being raped and that there was a cover up of this. It was quite something. I was right in the middle of it, and it was not unlike China in the 50s and 60s, the Cultural Revolution. There was a whole lot of public shaming going on, a whole lot of grandstanding, and just one lie after another about the number of women who were being raped on college campuses, when it turned out basically almost none were. And after case, we would actually read the testimony, the transcript of the trial or whatever, or the internal proceedings, and we found out, oh, this 2 19-year-old kids got drunk and they had sex, and then she woke up and thought that she was raped. Anyway, that began there, and then the race hysteria on campuses. All this stuff started on campuses, which was about 2 years after that, kind of after Michael Brown, Ferguson, St. Louis. So that is about 2014, 15. And people forget again, every significant college campus in the United States had some sort of sit-in, walkout, seizure of a building, some kind of protest. At Occidental, they occupied and then surrounded the administration buildings. They trapped administrators inside the buildings, claiming that there was rampant, violent racism on the Occidental College campus. And they pointed, and the example they used to prove that was that one of the kids, someone had asked to touch her hair, and also that the security guards at Occidental, they didn't carry guns, but they carried flashlights, which could be used as weapons. So that was the reason they were occupied by Klansmen at Occidental College. But this was said everywhere. At Ivy League schools, remember Yale, the screaming about racism at Yale.
It was a witch hunt. But two cases. One, this might have been Oberlin. But Oberlin had a huge case. I forget the specifics of that, but there was one case
that was the best
where
one.
there was covered lab equipment. So you saw a white covered lab equipment in the corner of a window, and people thought it was a Klan hood. And there was like legit reports that the Klan was organizing when it was just covered lab equipment. And then here at Indiana University, there was Dominican friars who wear white robes. And they thought the Dominican friars who were doing outreach at the Catholic Center were Klan members because they wore white robes.
People might remember there was a massive University of Missouri at Columbia. Massive, what was it? A sit-in encampment for days, weeks. And that crazy professor went viral when she starts screaming into the camera about how she needs to protect the poor black people.
Oh, she was shoving journalists. She was organizing people to shove journalists. That was her big thing. Yeah.
Because the black students at Missouri needed to be protected.
Yeah.
From all the racists, the violent racists. Yeah. So that went on for 2 years. And then that sort of spilled into and contributed to a greater racial hysteria that BLM sort of harnessed or orchestrated or whatever, that of course culminated in 2020. And I don't need to go through that. So kind of the latest mass hysteria around race. But Me Too then also followed from the campus date rape hysteria. So we had Me Too hysteria and then the race hysteria in 2020. And then you could say during COVID, there were multiple hysterias, I suppose, depending on your point of view. I do think there was, on our side of the COVID issue, I think there was considerable hysteria. I think a lot of the stuff was overstated about conspiracies by the government and revoking the Constitution and et cetera, et cetera. But certainly there were hysterias about COVID itself that were just plain hysteria, because we know that it wasn't nearly as deadly as we were told, et cetera. And then began, and I think this pretty much dates to.
Oh, real quick.
Yeah.
At that moment in time, I want to call it out because I revisited the first Icarus Fest tapes because I was like, oh, didn't we talk about this in the panel where it had Max Blumenthal and Mike Tracey, and they were talking about the origins of the gray zone. And they were like, yeah, 2018, 2019, there's this Me Too hysteria that took down Alternet, that took down the National Institute, the Nation Institute, that took down all these progressive institutions that were mired in hysteria. And that took away all the funding that Blumenthal had behind his books and behind all of his projects. And so he had to go independent with the gray zone at that time. And it was all birthed out of needing to escape this hysteria in progressive circles. Yeah,
there are always some unintended good consequences from these things too. I mean, the demise of BLM was also, began in 2020. I mean, but so then Elon Musk takes over Twitter and lets all the right wingers back into Twitter. And that's when you see this new hysteria emerge around a very odd topic, pedophilia. Suddenly, pedophilia and pedophiles are this omnipresent threat to our children, to our country, to our nation, to the world. They're also running the government. They're running the world government. There's a conspiracy among them. They also happen to be satanic and often cannibals. And that was consumed, certainly Twitter. And I enjoyed being a part of that greatly in around 21, 22. But then that just took off. Libs of TikTok was kind of the main ringleader. But the whole MAGA movement, and the sort of the QAnon portion of it in particular, that's all they talked about for about 2 years. People, again, forget this. And I'm very pleased to see all of that collapsing at their feet now, and many of those very same people no longer wanting to talk about pedophilia or saying things like Megyn Kelly, like, well, a 16-year-old's not the same. That's not the same as a baby, so that's not pedophilia.
Did Megyn Kelly say that today? I didn't.
She said it like 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
yeah, no, and many MAGA right wingers who were screaming at anybody who would even raise these issues about age of consent, or like, why is the age of consent in half the country 16 and the other half of the country 18? Does that mean that half the states are legitimizing pedophilia and the rape of children? Anyway, you couldn't even raise those issues without being screamed at and losing your job. And now, turns out, MAGA is our best friend for those of us who want to call into question the very odd age of consent laws and the ways in which they're determined. So here we are. It's all blowing up in their faces, and Michael Tracey is out there throwing gas on that fire. Poor Michael. He was on Piers Morgan last night, and I believe him. And his earpiece went out or something at one point.
Well, he directly answered the question immediately 5 seconds later, so it doesn't matter. Like, he directly said, "I'm not being paid by anybody," and it was what's her name, Tara Palmieri, accused him of being paid by somebody, and this shows up in his comment sections all the time, that who's paying you? There has to be some billionaire pedophile who's paying you to cover up for them. That could be the only thing that could explain your behavior. When if you followed Michael Tracey at all, like I was just thinking about the first Icarus Fest, he was talking about these Me Too hysterias taking out all progressivism, and But
this is what Michael Tracey's always done his entire career. And by the way, Tracey's career is now, he was my second guest on Unregistered. He was the second guest I interviewed. And that was in 2017. So he had already established himself. He had already been around for several years. And that's when he was in his 20s. He's like your age then. He's been doing this for quite a while. And I know his career very well. And this is who he is. This is the way he's always been. And there is zero evidence or any reason to believe that he's ever been paid by anyone to write anything.
He's
he's an independent thinker for sure, and a true journalist. True journalist.
The last person with real standards, journalistic standards left, really.
And Michael, I got to say this. So the the political groups of people that I consort with, that I feel allied with and solidarity with, has shrunk yet again. So, it was, if you went through the whole woke uproar that I mentioned, the woke hysterias of the 2010s and early 2020s, skeptical of them or hostile to them, I joined with you. And those are the people who were on my show. Those are, people I hung out with and interviewed. And then COVID happened. And then, I gained some new friends, those of us who were skeptical of the COVID narrative, but lost a lot of friends too, because it turned out there were quite a few friends who were, so-called good on woke, but not so great on masks and vaccines, etc. And then the pedophilia thing happened, and I saw lots and lots and lots of people on the MAGA right, the dissident right, who I, at that point, was interested in, had felt general solidarity with, because I thought their critique of liberalism and the Democratic Party were quite important and new. I saw a lot of them lose their minds over this stuff and start calling everybody a pedophile and becoming obsessed with drag queens, and Drag Queen Story Hour was the #1 news issue for them. And then, and now this, the Epstein files, and Palestine. And then Palestine happens, and I lose even more friends. I gained a few new friends on the left, but saw a lot of my friends totally side with Israel on the slaughter and the ethnic cleansing, and with Zionism generally. So my world shrunk yet again. And now this, and now all the friends, or almost all the friends I made around Palestine and foreign policy generally, almost all of them are completely caught up in the Epstein hysteria. The pedo hysteria. And it's very depressing. I mean, I've praised Breaking Points multiple times on this show, which up till this point, I do maintain for about a year now has been the best news analysis show you can find. Daily news analysis show. This is the best weekly one, but the best daily is Breaking Points. They've been excellent on so many things, especially on foreign policy. Ryan Grimm has been great on so many things. Well, Ryan Grimm and Breaking Points are devoting almost every segment these days to Epstein and the pedophile sex ring that controls American politics and yada, yada, yada. It's all nonsense, guys. It's all nonsense. There is not one single piece of evidence. What's amazing is, so child rape ring, right? Sex trafficking ring. So there's no evidence of any children anywhere. And the people will say, oh, well, there was a 14-year-old, the story around the 14-year-old, look it up. It was secondhand hearsay. No evidence of him doing anything to a 14-year-old. Yes, he was convicted of soliciting sex from a girl/woman in Florida who was at that time 17 years and 10 months old, which, as I said, is legal in most states, and every European country. That's perfectly legal. Is it like cool and fabulous for a 50-year-old man to have sex with an almost 18-year-old? Okay, different question. But like, to make that into a pedophile thing is ridiculous. So no children. Oh, no nudity.
Yeah.
No evidence of any trafficking whatsoever. Mm-hmm. No evidence, and certainly the cannibal stuff, I don't even know. Like, the number of people who actually seem to believe that there was cannibalism, they were eating children, is shocking to me. Even some people who are sort of intelligent generally have bought into that. They believe that there was torture going on and mass killing of children and women, and there's zero evidence for any of this. There's not even anything that's suggestive of that happening. There's some odd little turns of phrases in some emails. Literally, there'll be like 2 or 3 words, said, oh my God, he said there's a torture video. Oh, that must mean they're torturing children on camera. Turns out, as Tracy showed, it was referring to some foreign policy thing. I think it was the UAE or something, got embarrassed because there was a torture video of one of their government officials doing something at that very time. It's amazing, but people will look at these images of fully grown, fully dressed adults, and they'll say, "Oh my God, look, it's Jeffrey Epstein torturing and raping children and eating them when he's just like playing around in a kitchen, with women."
Or there's the most damning stuff in there that looks the worst is redacted, blurred, censored images that are like barely legal pornography that is like legally made of people over 18. But if you blur it out and you put bars over it, you can imagine that this is a victim of his when it's just really ugly porn on his hard drive that was legally made and distributed. And unfortunately, this kind of material gets millions of views every day on the internet. Like,
exactly.
And you're the one sharing it. You, the person who thinks that pedophilia is so awful, you're the one sharing it to me and making me imagine this stuff.
Exactly.
There we go.
Yeah. So yes, it is amazing that people will look at these pictures and they'll see demons raping and eating children when there's nothing but adults and they're fully clothed and there's no sex and there's certainly no cannibalism happening. Just the very best people in the anti-war, anti-imperialist world. I mean, almost all of them are bought into this, at least to some extent.
Or they'll repeat stuff that's easily verifiably false. That's the big thing that Michael Tracey is doing a good job at, is like I can't tell you how many people I respect who shared the he won the lottery thing, as if he's got this embezzlement scheme with New Mexico to win the lottery there and funnel money out of there. And that means
It turns out, what was it? Some woman in Texas had to form an LLC to receive her lottery winnings. And she chose the name Zorro Capital, which just happens to be Epstein, the name of one of Epstein's companies.
Yeah. He never got the money. She did.
It had nothing to do with him.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with him. But I won't name names, but some people I know very well who have been on my show many times, who are awesome on many, many issues. I saw them on a show running with that. Oh, further proof that, who else could get away with that? I mean, clearly there was some major government intervention to let Jeffrey Epstein win the lottery. Why would Jeffrey Epstein want to win the lottery? Why would he play the lottery if he's a multi-billionaire? Why would that be even significant if he's a multi-billionaire? It's just, people want to believe in mass child rape, and we need to get to the bottom of that. That is the question. Why is it that people want to see children being raped? Why is it that they see children being raped when there are no children being raped? Why is that? And of course, they don't talk about the actual cases of child rape, which turn on the news. They happen every day. You can find probably today some news story about a child actually being raped by a man. That's a daily occurrence. It almost always happens within families and within churches and within schools and the Boy Scouts, conservative institutions. Maybe that's why they don't want to talk about those things. But the absolute obsession with an insistence that there is this mass pedophilia going on, we got to look inside, everybody. The call's coming from inside the house. I don't know how else to say this. I've been told by a lot of you who are pedophile hysteria peddlers that every accusation is a projection, or every accusation is a confession. I think there's something to that. Well, think about it. Think about your own fantasies and why they're so persistent.
Well, this is one thing the movie Eddington got right, is Emma Stone's character. She was abused by a family member in the movie, and she gets obsessed with a kind of Epstein-like conspiracy that everybody's a pedophile, and that's how all power is done, through sexual abuse. And what's really going on there is she's not addressing the actual abuse that she encountered, and she's projecting it onto this giant conspiracy when people aren't talking to each other, looking at each other in the face, addressing the real thing. They're escaping into their phones and creating this massive artifice of fantasy that has giant geopolitical things when implications. It's the answer to everything. That's another thing, is that these conspiracies explain everything. It's very Marvel brained. It's very, this is the Avengers Endgame, and Jeffrey Epstein is Thanos, and he's behind all the worst things in pop culture. He's behind everything in foreign policy. He's behind every administration, the last 5 administrations. And really, he's just a very unimpressive guy. That's what the Epstein files really show, is that he's pretty dumb.
Yeah. Right. I noticed that too. I was surprised. I thought he would be sort of sharp and witty, but no, I've seen no evidence of that either.
And this criminal mastermind is using an unencrypted Gmail account. Like he's talking in code about eating kids, but he's doing that on an unencrypted Gmail account.
Right. Yeah. Oh, and they, I mean, I've seen so many very smart people who are some of the best political analysts out there. And I mean this. Be sure that the references to pizza are references to raping kids in the emails. That the pizza and the grape soda and the, what was the other thing? Oh, that's got to be, that's beef jerky. It's got to be code for raping kids.
Eating kids is the jerky thing.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Why is it stored in fridges?
Sure. Go have at it. I mean, again, there's a news story today about a child being raped somewhere. So why don't you go look at that instead? You can actually see real evidence of it. It's something else.
And then the thing is, okay, so there's the Me Too thing, which Michael Tracey is pointing out, is that it's taking out huge people in huge prominent positions based off of innuendo. So, now Noam Chomsky's legacy is entirely tarnished.
Jesus Christ.
Because Michael Tracey has an article in Compact right now that Noam Chomsky was right, that he was absolutely correct to call this a hysteria at the time, and that, despite Epstein being such a shady figure, this is something that he looked into, that people were going way too far with their allegations, that this was a guy who brokered very important meetings that Noam Chomsky had with Ehud Barak, with really important people. And he looked into this and he said, this is a hysteria, and this is maybe how you should go forward with this. And for this, we're supposed to completely abandon Noam Chomsky's legacy, consider him a pedophile, apologist, collaborator,
So there's the left-wing attack on Chomsky, or using the Epstein connection to utterly destroy Chomsky, which has been happening on the left for the last 2 weeks now. The history of that, I was gonna tell Tracey this. I don't think he knows this, but the history of it's very interesting, and it has to do with another crucial issue that we've talked about quite a bit, especially at the Academy, which is JFK. So the origins of this, Christian Parenti, whose father's Michael Parenti, I've heard him talk about this, but there's a lot of history of this. So when Oliver Stone's idiotic movie came out in '92, JFK, positing, of course, famously that the CIA killed Kennedy because Kennedy was a peacemaker, wanted to end the war in Vietnam and end the Cold War. And so they took him out. When that happened, the left had a new split. There were some on the left that number has grown since then. But at the time, Peter Dale Scott was the main one. He's an academic actually at Berkeley, wrote a book about how, Stone is right. The CIA killed Kennedy because Kennedy was going to withdraw from Vietnam. Not true, by the way. Because Kennedy was going to wind down the Cold War. Not true, by the way. Kennedy was an arch-imperialist, arch-hawk, always through his career. It's ridiculous that they portray him this way. Anyway, so that began the sort of new left-wing movement, which people could call the conspiracy theory left. Now, the thing is, and so that conspiracy theory left, which began with Peter Dale Scott in the early 1990s, has grown and grown and grown. And it's now become, I would say, the major portion of the real left, like the actual radical socialist, anti-imperialist left. I would say most of those people, not all, but most, do buy into the JFK was murdered by the CIA. Ridiculous thesis, and it's very depressing. There are people at the gray zone. They don't go on about this at the Gray Zone, but they do generally subscribe to that idea. So when that happened, kind of the old school lefties like Noam Chomsky, Alexander Cockburn, RIP, the greatest, by the way. If anybody gets a chance to revisit or look at Alexander Cockburn, spelled like Cockburn, Alexander Cockburn's work, that's my guy. He and I, we corresponded a little bit, but he was right on so many major issues when the rest of the left wasn't. Anyway, Cockburn, Chomsky, and some others, serious left-wing intellectuals, said, this is nonsense. Kennedy, he increased the military budget. He increased the nuclear arsenal. He had no intention of withdrawing from Vietnam. And there's a whole new book out about that. In fact, he was talking, as we know, his entire career about sending American soldiers and sending American Peace Corps volunteers everywhere into the world to raise up the people in those villages and those huts and to make them be more like Americans. It's gross that they even suggest that. But so Chomsky and Cockburn came out and lambasted the whole Oliver Stone, Peter Dale Scott conspiracy theory about Kennedy. And that, since then, they haven't forgiven him. Now, the JFK conspiracy theory left, as I said, grew and grew and grew. And you'll see, I mean, the Gray Zone, they're a part of that. Jimmy Dore show is part of that. I don't know. There's much of the real left, the anti-war, anti-imperialist left, totally subscribes to this idea. And I would like to, at some point, have a sit-down conversation with those guys about this very topic. So anyway, since then, they haven't forgiven Chomsky for not subscribing to this conspiracy theory about JFK. And that's the real origin of this attack on it. Using this opportunity to attack him, it's really, really doubly bad.
Well, now they believe Israel killed JFK. That's what everybody says now. Yeah.
There's about a 0.1% chance of that. I won't dismiss that, but anyway, the idea that he was killed for being a peacemaker is what really is ridiculous. So,
so Epstein, Ro Khanna, Thomas Massie. I want to talk about this too. That they read these names. There's this big thing about this huge fuss over the names that are redacted in the files, and that the administration is covering up for pedophile protectors and pedophiles and collaborators. And then so they read these names with no information other than these are powerful rich men who are connected to this conspiracy. And they end up naming random people that were in a police lineup who happened to look like Jeffrey Epstein at the time for a police lineup purposes. And this got a mechanic fired. This got an IT worker in some trouble too. Real dangerous defamation that's actually harming people's lives in what is obviously a witch hunt. You've got powerful people stepping down just for emailing the guy, and you've got random people getting hooked up with it just because their names appear in a 3 million page dump. It's nuts.
I told Thomas Massie on Twitter, this is a terrible stain on your career.
Yeah.
Which it just is. He and Ro Khanna are the best Congress people we've had. In fact, you could argue they're the only worthwhile Congress people we've had in the last 10 years. Clearly the best. Massie, for sure, is the best congressperson we've had in the last 10 years.
He was heroic on the COVID spending. I'll say that.
He's been great on foreign policy. He's been the best. Not perfect, but he's been clearly the best on civil liberties, foreign policy, the big stuff, the important stuff. What were you going to? What else do you not like about Massie?
Again, I see the Trump administration as the one thing that's gotten people actual political wins, and I see him spiraling in opposition to the Trump administration, and I see this as part of it. I see. He did not talk about Epstein at all during the Biden administration, and that's important. Chris Wray testified about this. People questioned Chris Wray about this, and Massie was in those hearings. He had no questions for Chris Wray. He only started championing this when Trump started to fund his primary opponent after Massie didn't vote for the one big beautiful bill. So, and then Ro Khanna, in 2019 was like, we need more info about the Jeffrey Epstein thing so we can put these conspiracy theories to rest. And now he's number one conspiracist on all this.
Right.
And you can hear them repeating talking points for Media Matters on this, referring to the administration as the Epstein class, that the entire ruling class is the Epstein class. This is Jake Tapper is saying this, like, politicians are saying this. And Hillary Clinton is totally on board with this. Hillary Clinton is on board with this, calling Ro Khanna heroic for this and implying that Donald Trump is covering stuff up. And Reid Hoffman, who had a close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, is funding some of the ads that aired like on Super Bowl Sunday with all these victims. So, and also this bill, this is something I learned from libertarians. If something bipartisan is happening, that's probably a sign that it's something really, really bad, like the Patriot Act or all the wars. And so if every single congressional Democrat and every single Republican except one, who heroically was entirely right about this, votes for this, it's probably a really bad thing. There's probably another agenda going on. It's, and yeah, the people who cause me the biggest disgust is congressional Democrats having sex panics. It reminds me entirely of the college rape hysteria and of the Brett Kavanaugh hysteria. It's just cheap sex panic to get a ton of attention, to win cheap political points, so they don't actually have to do their jobs and deliver on anything. Yeah. It's just so they can grandstand. It's right. Disgusting. Yeah.
Right. With the Democrats and the liberals, it's clearly just opportunistic.
Yeah.
And partisan, which is why I'm especially disappointed with some of the people I've named, and just very, very good people on every other issue, or almost every other issue. Excellent, super smart analysts who are fully bought into this. And there's just no evidence, guys. So yeah, they clearly jumped on this for partisan purposes, which it's just very sad. But yeah, Massey especially, just again, like, he's been by far, if you're anywhere near my politics, he's clearly the best congressperson. But not anymore. I don't even know what to do with him anymore. It's so depressing. So depressing.
And then if you really care about prosecutions for this, like, I do believe that, yeah, there is a possibility that some crimes were committed in the midst of all this. It's but the thing is, you need actual evidence to build a case, and it's hard to get prosecutions. And now it's pretty much impossible, that because all these documents have been declassified like this. Like, the Justice Department needs more evidence to build a real case if you want an actual prosecution. And another reason why I think this has bipartisan support is that if there is a conspiracy, this massive declassification, all this innuendo coming out, makes it impossible for there to be an impartial jury, makes it impossible for the DOJ to actually build a real case to prosecute anybody on. So if there are evil billionaires in this ring, they're so happy that they're pretty much off scot-free now.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, the billionaires are happy, but you know who's really happy is pedophiles. Because if you're like an actual pedophile who actually rapes children, it's like, oh, well, shit, everybody does it now, apparently. Like, even the most successful, smartest, wealthiest, most powerful people in the world do it. So cool. Like, the presidents and the princes and the CEOs and Bill Gates and Harvard professors, they do what I do. So what's so bad about it then?
Yeah. Oh, and MAGA with the pedophile stuff, like, you guys also took your eye off the ball. The ball is Anthony Weiner's laptop. What is on Anthony Weiner's laptop? That's an FBI possession. You know, if there's something real from the WikiLeaks emails, and if there's something real with the Podestas and Reid Hoffman and Hillary Clinton, it's on the Anthony Weiner laptop. So, you know, your 10-year crusade led you on a wild goose chase that led nowhere. And here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. The call's coming from inside the house, everybody.
Cool. You want to talk Iran and Cuba right now?
Yeah. Well, we should, because we're about to kill a bunch of people.
Yeah. You think so? I The rumor I've heard is that Trump is waiting for the Olympics to be over so that he can start a war without the international community feeling this kumbaya moment of the Olympics, and he doesn't want to give the United States a bad name during that. That's just a rumor. That's not based on anything. Yeah.
I mean, the fact is that there are now 2 aircraft carrier groups in the Persian Gulf. So the Lincoln was joined by the Gerald Ford, which is the most modern, advanced, most powerful aircraft carrier in the world, with all of its destroyers accompanying it. Massive troop deployment to the Persian Gulf region. And the Ford had just come from Venezuela. That was the aircraft carrier that was off the coast of Venezuela. It has spent the last month, I guess, floating across the ocean to get to the Gulf to take on Trump's latest mission. So it would be, I don't see how Trump's going to walk back from this. There's going to be some kind of strike. Every serious analyst I've looked at on all sides, by the way, believe that there's a strike imminent, and a major attack, not just a strike. And there are, estimate, and now Iran is current today, I think, is clearly announcing or showing that it is planning to close the Strait of Hormuz, which would cut off oil to 20%. 20% of the world's oil goes to the Strait of Hormuz. So that would be a massive disruption to the world economy. And then they've also threatened in various ways to attack both privately held oil companies in the Persian Gulf, but also the U.S. air bases, military bases that are protecting them, which are right across the Gulf from Iran. Al Udeid, which is the biggest U.S. base in the Middle East, is within easy strike distance of Iranian missiles. I think there's 10,000 U.S. troops there, stationed there. All of them, if you're listening to this, I recommend that you leave. You leave, you go AWOL, you leave. You run away from the base, go home, and face whatever consequences will come, because otherwise you might be looking at some Iranian missiles raining down on you really soon. We could have like 50, 100, 200 American troops dead. Many more Iranians will die, no doubt about it. And possibly some Israelis will die as well, because Iran will probably shoot at Israel as well. And we know they've been holding a lot of their ICBMs, or a lot of their ballistic missiles, in reserve for such a thing. A lot of their bunkers are underground because they've been preparing for such an eventuality, such an attack, for decades. But it looks like it's coming. It looks like it's coming. And this would be a real catastrophe. Now, I know people will say, oh, that's what you said about the 12-day war in June last year. I didn't say that. Some people said it. I wasn't sure it would escalate into a major global war. But this, if Trump continues doing what he's been doing, which is a massive escalation, and it culminates in an actual coordinated attack, a wide-ranging attack, then I do think Iran, the Islamic Republic, which has been extremely restrained always in its dealings with the West for good reasons, because it's always been outgunned. At this point, they're on the verge of collapse, the regime there, the government there. They're being surrounded, they're being attacked, they're being subverted from within. They just killed at least 3,000 people in the streets, many of whom were almost certainly organized and armed by the CIA and Mossad and MI6. But they showed that they're now ready to fight in a fairly ruthless way against this subversion, this foreign subversion. So if there is some kind of massive sustained attack against Iran, I do think that they will strike back against the U.S. And then if they kill an American soldier, what have the American people historically tended to do in such situations? Unfortunately, our extremely ignorant, reactive, stupid population, 90+% of it anyway, they want war because they never ever feel the effects of it directly. So it's easy for Americans to call for war, and they're going to do it again And that's what I fear, is that Iran will strike U.S. personnel somewhere in the Middle East and kill 1 or 2 or maybe 20 of them. And then it's really on, because the idiot American people will give Trump all the support and Israel all the support it wants for a total war against Iran. And by the way, the objective, for people wondering, and this is like been announced by Israeli think tanks, by American think tanks that are pro-Israel, by most major foreign policy think tanks, the objective, they've been saying this for a year now, is to balkanize, to break up Iran. They want to basically force some kind of crisis, or they have been forcing multiple crises, sanctions, dropping the rial, the Iranian currency, to worthless value. They want to make life so miserable for Iranian people that they will rise up in some sort of civil war against the regime. But we all know there is no opposition. There's no organized opposition ready to take control. So what this will almost certainly mean is just a fracturing of the country and a civil war, and the nightmare chaos that we've seen in Syria, Libya, and other places where the U.S. has intervened on behalf of Israel. That's their objective. The Foundation for Defense of Democracies, which is the Israeli front think tank in Washington, they've been saying this out loud explicitly since last summer, that's the objective. They want to break apart Iran and bring about a civil war too, because that'll just weaken the state, right? The Iranian state is the principal threat to Israel, to Zionism, to the Israeli project. So just having a weaker state apparatus, generally a smaller state, a decentralized state, makes it less of a threat to Israel. And so that's their objective. They know they can't win. They're not going to have Reza Pahlavi, the Shah's son, take control. There is no political movement or organization or faction within Iran that's ready to take control. It's just going to be chaos, which will make it weaker and therefore safer for Israel. That's what this is all about. And it's an absolute nightmare scenario.
Mm-hmm. Witkoff is still meeting with Iran's foreign minister
in Geneva.
They had meetings in Geneva, which is like, if you listen to them, they sound like, oh, we've got the beginnings of maybe a plan starting. And then if you listen to Khomeini and Trump, it sounds like Khomeini is saying your regime change will fail, and Trump is saying a regime change might be a good idea. So it is a matter of how, but it does look like there is some strategic plan to take out, we've already taken out Venezuela, then Cuba, and then Iran, and then perhaps China. I'm not sure if China's necessarily direct confrontation or something like that, but it taking out the axes of opposition to the United States one by one in like a series of increasing dominoes. It seems like that's a vision going on. And, how that gets accomplished, I don't know. But yeah.
Yeah. So meanwhile, over the last 2 weeks, both Russia and China have been meeting extensively with Iranian officials and making plans to send them direct aid, everything they need, weapons. Russia, we don't know for sure, but it's pretty clear that Russia has been sending and is continuing to send weapon systems into Iran. China, I think, is providing economic assistance in various ways. So, this aggression against Iran is, of course, forcing our enemies, so-called, to join together, which, again, it's blowback comes in many forms. This is just one of them. Yeah, I mean, the BRICS alliance is really becoming important now.
It does seem a little weaker, though. It seems like they're not putting forth any serious plans to come up with a currency alternative to the United States. Some of those countries went back to the dollar, and I feel like that was their big push, and that sort of failed.
Yeah, but
strategically, they're definitely cornered now, and they have to.
That's the thing.
Come together.
It was sort of an exercise until now, and now it's real. And now it's real.
Mm-hmm. But then, Brazil might get lopped off of that if if Lula gets out during the next election and Bolsonaro's son gets in.
Mm-hmm.
That might be another Latin American proxy that we set up if Trump stays in power. And you're talking about Cuba as well. Taking out Venezuela, now there's no jet fuel coming from Venezuela, so nobody can leave the country. And it seems like, they're basically trying to have a sanction that will starve the country and force a revolution to happen there. Scott Horton did a debate with somebody who's worked with the Trump administration, I forget, on Zero Hedge. And it was funny. They agreed on like 60% of the stuff. And then Scott Horton took all of his time to debate to just ask really specific questions that he wanted to learn more about because of this guy's experience. But this guy was really sure that there wasn't going to be a direct intervention in Cuba. And from what it sounds like, from what Marco Rubio said, it sounds like their position is to sanction them and let them fail. And that seems to be happening right now.
Yeah. So the story is that, Cuba's an island with scarce oil resources. I think they have a little bit, but not enough to sustain themselves. And so they've always been dependent on imports for oil. And until 1991, of course, the Soviet Union very readily and happily supplied them with their oil and a lot of other economic assistance. That dried up. There have been negotiations between Russia and Cuba and off and on help from Russia since then. Venezuela stepped in under Chavez in the late 90s, early 2000s, and started to provide Cuba with a lot of its oil. Then Mexico did. And actually, Mexico is the bigger player in this, as I understand it. In the last 5 or so years, Mexico has provided a lot of the oil to Cuba to keep it afloat. And what Trump did in January, after taking partial control of the Venezuelan government, was to block that by sanctioning any country that ships any oil to Cuba, by threatening massive tariffs on any oil that sends oil to Cuba, on any country that sends oil to Cuba. And because of that, since late January, there's been simply not enough oil in Cuba to provide the energy the people there need. It's 9 million people, the population of Cuba. 5 major cities, I believe, with connecting flights normally. Right now, there are no flights in Cuba. You can't get from city to city, and you can't leave Cuba on an airplane right now. There are reports I've heard of actual hunger, not quite famine, meaning not people dying yet.
There's been hunger for the last 6 years at least, though.
But more so in the last 2 months.
Yeah.
Is what I hear anyway. But like real hunger where people simply don't have enough food to eat or don't have enough food. I mean, it's not a bad strategy if you want to create chaos and just want to simply hurt people and destroy any other country that you don't like. It's not a bad idea. If you are the global hegemon with control over the world economy, you can do that. And the history of communism, and let me say this, I mean, I'm an anti-communist. Fundamentally, all the way down to the bottom, from the bottom up, communism is, to me, the worst possible idea. However, actually existing communist or socialist countries and movements have never, ever been allowed to function without massive coercion from Western countries, without sanctions, blockades, military interventions, all of which make it extremely difficult to manage or operate any kind of economy of any kind. This was true for the Soviet Union. It's true for Cuba, North Korea, all of them. Every single one of them has been attacked and surrounded and constrained and embargoed and sanctioned and invaded and subverted militarily by the US, Great Britain, and to some extent Israel for 120 years now, ever since there have been major communist movements that have the potential to take over countries. There is never, and this goes for Islamist republics too, like Iran, never once. There's not been a single day when Iran hasn't had to function without massive sanctions, embargoes, pressure from outside. I'd like to let them do their experiment. I'd like to allow the communists of the third world to do their thing. Show us, does this work better for the people? But we've never allowed that. And that's what's happening now on an extreme level. And so, yeah, I mean, they're literally willing to starve the people of Cuba to save them.
Mm-hmm.
It's an old story, very old, sad story.
I do think that Miguel Diaz-Canel in Cuba is a uniquely unpopular figure, though.
Who's that?
The current president of Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
From what I've heard, like I've heard a lot of Latin American leftists or Latin Americans who have baked into them the leftist critique that a lot of Latin Americans have of the United States as a anti-colonial, anti-imperial critique that's really common in Latin American culture. But, a lot of them, did not like Maduro or see a lot of people who rise to like these communist dictator positions as just as evil and corrupt and have a critique of power that extends to them as well. And Miguel Diaz-Canel, you got Fidel Castro, the actual revolutionary who stood up to the United States. You've got Raul, his brother. So there's a connection there. But from what I hear, Miguel is a bureaucrat who represents like the white elite of Cuba. And, for the last 6 years has been starving his people off and on to begin with. They've had crises for the last 6 years, and they see him as a uniquely weak, petty figure. That's just what I've heard about this guy, and they are wanting to move ahead to something new.
Mm-hmm.
I do agree that sanctions can be cruel, and all that, but yeah,
sure. I mean, there's in the 1980s, there were news reports of people in Havana hanging wire hangers, coat hangers out of their windows with a wire attached to a little transistor radio in their apartment in Havana so that they could pick up the signals from the Miami radio stations so they could listen to American pop music. And that's when hip hop especially started to infiltrate Cuba.
Well, they wanted to listen to Two Live Crew.
Yep.
Which, by the way, Uncle Luke is going to be running for Congress.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go. I wish he were president.
Yeah.
I wish he were king.
And he got caught up in a Epstein thing as well. He was another casualty of the Epstein hysteria going around right now.
That's right.
So, yeah.
So my point was that, there's been a tacit resistance in Cuba forever.
Totally.
To communism. But again, like the regime has never been allowed to show what communism can do. And I'm very skeptical of what communism can do. And I will never want to be a part of a communist society. I'm sure of that. But they've never been allowed to function properly, because of all the pressures exerted on it by the United States since 1960, since the very first year of the revolution. Yeah, it's disgusting. I don't know, deliberately causing people to be hungry because you want to change the government in another country. There's imperialism. All right, we've got 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
What should we do? We got, what else?
Well, there's the Munich Security Conference. Do you want to talk about Marco Rubio's speech or any of the Dems appearances? Or if you want to keep it on foreign policy, I think that's where to go.
Yeah. Rubio's speech, man. You must have liked it.
Yeah. Very much. Yeah.
Some blood and soil shit, man.
Yeah.
It is. Well, it's blood and soil imperialism.
Well, I didn't hear the imperialism track there necessarily, although I do think there's explicit imperialism just starting right now in the United States.
It's the new. So I have a piece, right, in Substack about Trump's whole new reformulation of the American empire.
Yes.
Which is to retrench it to the Western Hemisphere.
To make it an American empire, not a proxy of the British Empire.
Yep. And to allow our proxies / allies like Great Britain and Israel primarily to manage things in Europe and the Middle East so that we don't have to do it directly ourselves anymore. We'll have all of our guns mostly in the Western Hemisphere, and that's what we will claim as our sovereign territory is the Western Hemisphere. So, and Rubio's speech is, I think, consistent with that, in which he talks a lot about civilizations, the integrity of national civilizations. And he says, we respect the civilizations of Europe. And that's why we want you to take care of your own security, to pay for your own security and provide for your own security, because we want you to be strong and proud of who you are as civilizations. And we will do the same in the Western Hemisphere, I guess, suggesting that America is the only civilization in the Western Hemisphere. But it's another complete break from American foreign policy tradition, in which, that they've always talked about the global obligations of the United States, the global presence of the United States being essential to bringing about a virtuous world. Trump, Rubio, MAGA have abandoned that, and they don't even care about virtue anymore, or extending democracy or freedom. They don't talk about that anymore. They just simply talk about American power, which is actually refreshing and I think an improvement. But a lot of people will be killed along the way of establishing this new American empire centered around the Western Hemisphere. But it was remarkable, like completely discarding all of the American exceptional language about, we are the beacon of democracy. We will spread freedom around the world. We are obligated to uplift the world, be the world's policeman, all that gone. All the moral language of the American empire gone. It's now a simple, naked empire of power. So at least it's honest, clear, straightforward, and there will be less, I guess, if they carry this out, less of an American presence globally. I'd like to see if Rubio and Trump want to close down some military bases that are scattered all over the world, if they're really going to stand up for this new position they're taking. There should be no need for giant military bases in the Middle East and Africa and Asia and Europe if we no longer claim sovereignty over those areas. So we'll see about that. I'm waiting for that. I want a discussion of the military bases to begin.
This isn't explicitly in the speech, but just a side note on Ukraine. Have you noticed that the rhetoric of pulling out of NATO, this is kind of related to the speech. Yeah. The rhetoric of pulling out of NATO has kind of slowed down and stopped from the American side in the last few months. That was more explicit before. And the speech sort of talked about strengthening NATO as a union. And, every part of the whole needs to be strong so nobody will attack the whole. Is something Marco Rubio is getting at. And that implies that the United States is still going to be a member of NATO and we're still going to be allies together in a common project.
Right.
But here's the thing, though. I think United States membership in NATO might be the only thing holding back the radical, Keir Starmer, Germans, anti-Russia people from actually taking their own aggressive action against Russia. I think if the United States pulled out, there'd be nothing restraining these people in going whole hog against Russia and trying to win it for Ukraine.
Could be. Again, we have to wait and see how truly committed Trump and Rubio are to this new vision of the American empire. And again, will they actually start to retrench? And that means physical retrenchment, closing those bases that are all over the world and bringing our troops back home to defend, theoretically, the Western Hemisphere, I guess. But that's what they should be doing if they're going to follow their own dictum. Yeah, we'll see. I am skeptical of that. But at least theoretically, intellectually, the American empire is a new thing now. It's a whole new thing.
And then part of this, if you saw Rupert Lowe and the Restore Party putting out new messaging
in the
that
UK.
coincided right with this in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Like an explicitly pro-Western, pro-nationalist British identity, sort of taking Trumpism, saying Trumpism has worked in the United States and we're going to try it in the UK. Even some of the nationalist gains that we saw in Japan, but that the Trump project is having like this, ricocheting ripple effect in proving as a test case for other nations to try their policies of you might see remigration policies in parts of Europe if these parties take shape,
take power.
Yeah, take power.
Yeah, I mean that's remains to be seen. I mean,
yeah,
like 2 years ago, it looked like nationalist populist parties were going to take power in at least many European countries, and that hasn't really come to pass yet.
It's more of an uphill battle, but you've got Maloney and you've got more gains with AFD, and you've got the rhetoric moving way farther right in UK to where it's starting to consolidate to a real alternative when reform parties seem kind of like controlled opposition.
Sure. And you got the Le Pens in France, and I mean they're still there and they're still working. Orban in Hungary, and
Le Pen would have won if she wasn't banned from running.
But I don't see that. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that has sort of stagnated though. Like I don't see them gaining steam the way they were a couple of years ago. I could be wrong. We'll see. If the AfD gets any kind of significant place in German politics, then it's a new game. It's a new game.
Oh, and this does tie to the Epstein files. Bannon, when he, again, like all these conspiracists who are on Bannon's show just have no questions for Bannon about his relationships with Epstein, trying to rehabilitate him and their friendship that they had and what was the point of that. They just automatically, he was being a Machiavellian. That's the one thing that you can read into and look past face value is Steve Bannon. But Steve Bannon, you see in these emails, he might be lying to Epstein and he might be trying to win his favor, but it sounds like he thinks that Trump is an idiot and that he's the real leader of the international populist movement, that Steve Bannon is the one really behind it all, and that
it's true,
and that Trump is kind of dead weight to the movement.
So Steve is throwing Trump under the bus finally?
He was in the emails.
Right.
In the Epstein emails. And it sounded like
he's right. He's right about that. Bannon, I mean, for years leading up to Trump's victory in 2016, he was spending much of his time in Europe.
Exactly. Yeah.
He was in England. He was in Hungary. He was in France and Italy. He was touring Europe. I think Latin America too, trying to organize this nationalist populist movement into a global organized political force, coordinated, where they communicate with each other. And you saw that, like, you've seen that come to pass in like CPAC over the last several years, where Orban and other like Polish nationalist populists have come and spoken at CPAC. And Bannon has always been very inclusive and attentive to European and Latin American nationalist populist movements and leaders. And that's sort of happened. I mean, that is a thing now. They are somewhat coordinated. I mean, from Bolsonaro and Milei in Latin America to, as I said, Orban, Nigel Farage, and Maloney and Le Pen in Europe. I mean, they talk to each other. They coordinate. They have conferences. They meet with each other. They have a shared ideology, which is pretty consistent. There's a fair amount of ideological discipline among them. They sound alike. It's a real thing. I just don't know if it's on the verge of collapse or on the verge of victory. It could go either way right now.
I think Trump and Marco Rubio are injecting new life into it. And I think Bannon might have actually been a little egotistical and dead weight and a little subversive on this. That's what it's looking like more and more each day, is that Bannon had an ego of his own And this is something we always thought. He actually has deep Navy intelligence ties. He's been in elite circles this whole time. He came out of elite Hollywood circles. People forget about that. So
sort of.
Yeah.
I mean, he was in Hollywood making right-wing documentaries and films.
But before
but
that,
he was always marginalized. It's not like the major studios ever brought him in for meetings. That's why he had to make self-publish, self-produce all of his movies.
He produced Titus Andronicus in '99, which was a major release.
That was about it, though. Yeah. I mean, otherwise Hollywood kept him at arm's distance. Of course, sure. He's not in with Hollywood elite. Trust me, they hate him. Right? You know that
at a certain point, yeah. But
he was around it. He was around it, and he knows some people in that world. But as a class, Hollywood has nothing to do with Steve Bannon. But he understands the world. I would say that. And Navy intelligence. I mean, sure, he was a naval intelligence officer in the 60s or whatever it was, and Jack Posobiec was in the 2000s or whatever, but they weren't like admirals. They didn't have ties to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Secretary of the Navy, or anything like that. I don't know if they're really tied into elite circles there.
But if you follow his through line, he's a China hawk.
Yeah.
And to me, that seems like a pretty subversive agenda to have. And it seems like that's been the thrust of his project,
Yeah, I've been waiting. Every time Bannon talks about China, I listen very closely for him to use the word war, or use the word intervention, or use the word our troops, or use the word our Navy or our Air Force.
Yeah,
I've never heard him say that, and so I don't really think those guys. Peter Navarro is another one. The big anti-China hawks in MAGA. Gordon Chang is this professor at Stanford here who's like the major intellectual anti-China hawk. I don't think they really want war, though. I'm not sure what they want with China, and they've softened quite a bit on their anti-CCP rhetoric of late in the last year. You just don't hear about it much. It was the obsession on the Steve Bannon War Room for years. I know because I listened to it. China was in every episode. They talked about the threat of the CCP in every episode, but they never talked about what the U.S. should do in response to that, other than putting tariffs on China, and to force currency reform and trade reform. Otherwise, no, there's been no talk that I've heard among MAGA or Bannon of, sending the Pacific Fleet westward, to the South China Sea, or, surrounding Taiwan, or moving the nuclear subs to off the coast of China, or any of that stuff. So I don't thankfully, I actually don't think they're truly belligerent with China. I think they just they want to make a favorable trade deal with China, which will make America great. I think they're smart enough to understand that. The trade with China is the only way to make America great at this point. So we'll see.
It's just it's stinky. It's fishy that like none of the Epstein guys are going after Bannon. That's and I'm like, and when Bannon got kicked out during the first Trump administration, Trump called him Sloppy Steve, and the way that Ben Shapiro would talk about Steve Bannon, it just looks. I just less and less. He looks like this. What's this guy's deal? Like, why is he trying to rehabilitate Jeffrey Epstein? Why is he talking bad about Trump behind Trump's back? Like
the most fascinating figure in American politics of the last 10 years.
I love to listen to him. I think he's super intelligent, but it doesn't seem entirely forthright what's happening. And this is all conjecture on my part, but
who knows what's going on in Steve Bannon's head?
Yeah.
I would love to know. We got a wrap.
Yes, we do. Thanks.
But we do have an after show, which is happening right now. And if you want to hang out with us in the after show, just become a Substack subscriber, thaddeusrussell.substack.com. And I will have the URL link on my Substack, and you can just click on it once you become a member and join us in the most fun Zoom room you will find on the internet every Wednesday night in the after show. Michael, enjoy your gig.
Thanks.
And I hope we're not at war. Well, we will.
Yeah.
We're always at war. I hope we're not in a new war next week when I see you next.
Sweet. Or in the 3 hours we have.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Also, World War II, speaking of wars.
Oh my gosh.
Unregistered.academy.substack.com. The videos are up. The 4-session week-long marathon is up.
So the World War II course was last week. It was World War II week at the Academy. And now that course is available for streaming. So if you want to watch that course, it's 9 hours total, 4 sessions. Unregisteredacademy.substack.com. You'll see it on the front page. Click on it. I think many, if not most or all, of our viewers and listeners will gain a lot from that course. So I recommend it. All right. Thanks, man.
Sweet.
See you in the after show.
Yep.
Okay.
Peace.
We're not. Peace.
Bye.
Bye.